What are the Washington Wizards doing? This team, more than any other, absolutely drives me crazy in the NBA because they'll make one good move and then they'll follow that up with a complete head scratcher. Weird moves after weird moves. The team obviously not going anywhere next season. Last season, they appeared to try to put together a somewhat competent team that absolutely tanked. Clearly, they got the second overall pick. And just when it seemed like they were going to lean into tanking again this year for a loaded draft class in 2025, they make some more insane moves. So we're going to cover what the Wizards have been doing basically since the Bradley Beal trade. After we cover all the moves, we're going to try to give some suggestions of what they could possibly do.
Okay, so it's not all bad for Washington, but we have to start out with some moves here that they made. So beginning with the Bradley Beal trade, which we thought was the beginning of a complete rebuild of this team, which they seem like last offseason they already abandoned and tried to be a competitive team. Now it seems like they're kind of trying to do that again this year for whatever reason. But we got to look at this Bradley Beal trade to start. So basically in the deal, they got Chris Paul and Landry Shamet and 6 second-round picks is basically all they got. So they didn't really get a first-round pick for Bradley Beal. They got a 2024 first-round pick swap with Phoenix, which obviously didn't work out. Phoenix has Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and now Bradley Beal. So did you really expect that to turn into anything? And then in 2026, you have another first-round pick swap that they got in this deal. I mean, unless Durant leaves, then possibly this could turn into something. Even just with Booker, I think they're still going to be better than the Wizards in 2026. And then you have another 2028 pick swap and a 2030 pick swap, which I'm not going to try to predict if those will turn into anything, but it possibly will. And then you traded Bradley Beal and kind of a nice young player, Jordan Goodwin, who actually wasn't very good last year. So this trade basically was 6 second-round picks and Chris Paul, and then Landry Shamet, who they just let walk for Beal and Jordan Goodwin and Isaiah Todd. Already, I thought this trade was weird that they didn't get guaranteed first-round picks here and just a ton of second-round picks. Then in the draft, turns out they made a nice move here. They did get Bilal Coulibaly for Jarris Walker and one of those Phoenix picks and then another second-round pick. Right now, it looks like Coulibaly is going to be better than Jarris Walker unless he completely turns it around. Then they got Vukcevic, who I actually liked at the end of last year, a tall 7-footer who can shoot and looked like fairly athletic out there. And then they got Trace Jackson Davis, another solid draft pick. Obviously, they didn't know what he was going to turn into, but basically was the best big man for the Warriors last year. And they just gave him to the Warriors if we come to Trace Jackson Davis for $2 million. So not a great move here. After this Beal trade with Chris Paul, who is expected to get moved later on as well, you thought they were really going to lean into tanking, but no, they went out and traded Kristaps Porzingis, and all they got out of that was Tyus Jones, a really solid backup point guard who did not work out as a starting point guard last year, but they tried to put him as their starting point guard. Apparently, instead of just letting Jordan Poole run point and try to figure it out, which it seems like now this year they're going to do that with Jordan Poole. So just another move to make this roster a little more mediocre instead of trying to run with Jordan Poole, who they will trade for later. So then they also got a bunch of random role players in this deal. They got Mike Muscala, Danilo Gallinari, and Julian Phillips. Then came the Jordan Poole trade. So this is actually part of the Beal trade because they did get Chris Paul in that deal. So it actually makes the trade look pretty good now. They got those 6 second-round picks. They got a bunch of pick swaps down the road. One already didn't turn into anything. 2026 probably won't either. But they went out and got Jordan Poole. Pretty nice move. I mean, no one knew how bad he was going to be last year, but actually towards the end of the year, put up some solid numbers. I can put up on the screen some of his stats over the last couple of months of the season. Actually definitely turned it around under the interim coach, who now is their head coach, whose name is escaping me right now. So that was good to see that he did play better under that coach. And I don't think people realized some of the numbers he was putting up at the end of the season, but I'll put them up on the screen like I said. But what else they got from that trade? They got a first-round pick here, top 20 protected, albeit from Golden State. So you don't know what Golden State's going to be in 2030, but then another pick here too. So you really got Jordan Poole in that trade instead of Chris Paul. And then another head-scratching move here when you think that the Wizards are going to lean into tanking and trying to build some of these nice young players they have, like Denny Advia, Corey Kispert, Jordan Poole, Koulibaly. Like, these 4 guys should be getting all of the minutes they can handle, but no, they go out and then they sign Kuzma again to actually a pretty good deal, 4-year, $90 million, which looks really good now. A lot of people thought that this deal was with the anticipation that the Wizards were going to use this nice deal that they got Kuzma to trade him at the deadline and get something for him, because basically they had to spend money somewhere. So give it to Kuzma on a pretty good deal and then try to trade him to a contender. But no, they didn't trade him. And he's basically the best player on the roster, but holding them back a little from tanking, even though it seemed like they weren't trying to tank last year and they ended up absolutely tanking. But then another head-scratching move, signing Taj Gibson here for no reason, like a 38-year-old Taj Gibson, instead of giving minutes to Vukcevic, who I said I liked. And then a bunch of other random, like Exhibit 10 signings here. Another nice signing with Denny Advia, getting him 4-year, $55 million. Looks pretty good now. Another solid move I thought here to get Marvin Bagley. Obviously insanely injury prone, did not pan out in Sacramento. Looked decent at times for Detroit, but again ran into injury issues. So they got Marvin Bagley in a deal here, along with 2 second-round picks, and they had to give up Gallinari and Muscala, 2 players who came across in that deal for Tyus Jones. So it actually makes that deal look a little better. You take out those random role players and insert Marvin Bagley and 2 second-round picks. Actually looks pretty good now. So then we got the Richaun Holmes trade. They go out and get yet another center. Honestly, I can't remember if they got Holmes before or after Bagley got injured yet again. Still going out and getting another center. Head-scratching move when they traded Gafford for him, but they did acquire a first-round pick from OKC in February. It did look like this was not going to be a good pick. Turned out to be really late-round pick. Honestly, I can't remember when this pick was, but OKC's pick might have been like 28, 29. So you get basically a below average veteran center who I thought would be out of the league by now, and a late first round pick for Gafford. So not a terrible move. You probably would have had to pay Gafford. So after finishing basically with one of the worst records in the league, you think, okay, finally we're going to get out of this stretch of having a very mediocre team with like Kyle Kuzma as your best player, and just fully embrace tanking for this upcoming draft with Cooper Flagg and some other players who honestly I don't really know their game, because a lot of them haven't even played in college yet. But apparently it's supposed to be a pretty loaded draft class next year. They go out and get Alex Sarr with the 2nd overall pick, which is a pick I love. I would have took him 1st overall in this draft. Has the most star potential. They also get Dylan Jones, who I'm not familiar with, pick 26, so I guess that was from OKC. But they ended up trading him for 2 more players who I'm not really familiar with their game, so pretty good moves there. I think they had a solid draft overall. And it says they got Bub Carrington on July 6th. I believe that this deal was during the draft, if I'm not mistaken. Bub Carrington, I think another good pick. Poole and Carrington, I think, kind of have a similar game, but hopefully one of them works out as, you know, an elite scoring guard on their team. I think they do have a pretty nice backcourt here with Carrington and Poole if one of them works out. But they did give up Denny Avdia, who actually had a really solid season last year, and took on Malcolm Brogdon, who I hope they can get rid of, because I'm sick of seeing very average older role players on the Wizards just basically eating up minutes from possibly Bub Carrington or Jordan Poole next year. Really don't want to see that. And then they did get another first round pick, but it's probably going to be pretty bad because it's the 2nd most favorable out of Portland, Boston, and Milwaukee. All right, so at this point with the Wizards, basically what you have is Malcolm Brogdon. Then you got Bub Carrington and Jordan Poole as basically your 3 guards. So you got 1 old veteran, 2 younger guys. Not too mad about that. I think that Brogdon, even if he does stay there probably will be enough minutes for all 3 guys to go around at point guard / shooting guard. You also have Corey Kispert, who I think is more of a shooting guard though, who's pretty nice. You got rid of Denny Advia, so then you have Koulibaly basically as your small forward, Kuzma as your power forward, Alex Sarr as your center. And I definitely think that's a solid tanking lineup. I would personally get rid of Kuzma and Brogdon if there's any value there. Kuzma definitely has value. I'm not sure about Brogdon at this point, so I wouldn't be mad if they just hold on to Brogdon. Honestly, if they can't get that much for him. Really hoping that this offseason they would focus on trading Kyle Kuzma for some more first round draft picks. But no, what did they go out and do? They went out and they re-signed Richaun Holmes for a 2-year, $26 million on a contract. An absolute head scratcher, the worst signing and most confusing signing of the entire NBA offseason. Honestly, for me, I thought Richaun Holmes was not going to get a guaranteed roster spot in the NBA for this upcoming season. And then Washington goes out and signs him to 2-year, $26 million. The only good thing about this contract is that only half of it is guaranteed. Next year, they could just cut him, but still giving him $13 million for this upcoming season. Absolutely insane, especially after you just drafted Alex Sarr, who a lot of people think is a center that they were going to put next to Kuzma unless they traded him. Now you got Richaun Holmes in here making all this money. Just completely doesn't make sense. You also had Tristan Vucevic, who they had to decline his team option. I thought had some promise at the end of last year, had some really nice games. I'll throw him up on the screen if I didn't already when I talked about him earlier. They basically declined his contract. A day later, what do? They go out and sign yet another center who's expected to be the starting center in Jonas Valanciunas for a 3-year, $30 million, and they gave up a second-round pick to get him. Do they expect to compete in the next 3 years with Jonas Valanciunas, who is actually pretty old? Let's look how old he is. Valanciunas is 32 years old, so heading into the final year on this deal, he's going to be 34 years old for a guy who has declined statistically the past 2 years, went from 17.8 to 14 to just 12 last year. So they get him and Richaun Holmes. So basically it seems like they think Alex Sarr is going to be a power forward. But then if you start Alex Sarr, that means you're going to bump Kuzma down to small forward, which takes away Coulibaly starting or possibly Kispert not starting. So right now this just does not make sense unless they do go out and trade Kuzma. But then on top of this, yesterday on July 10th, they go out and sign another veteran wing player in Saddiq Bey. It seems like they anticipate is going to be a starter. Further takes away minutes from Kispert and Coulibaly while they still have Kyle Kuzma on this roster. So now you have a absolute glut big men and wing players on this team, with your most talented player right now probably being Kyle Kuzma, and their second best player, I really have no idea. Could be Jordan Poole if he continues to do what he did at the end of last year. Maybe Alex Sarr is amazing and is that second best player. I just don't know where they're going with this team now with these weird signings of Saddiq Bey, Jonas Valanciunas, Richaun Holmes. I guess they had to spend their money somewhere, but this roster just does not make any sense to me. Okay, so let's look at their anticipated depth chart from ESPN here. They say Malcolm Brogdon, starting point guard, Poole, Kuzma, small forward, Sarr, power forward, Jonas Valanciunas at the center. To me, it's insane not to start one of Kispert or Coulibaly. Two players definitely showed some promise last year. Two young guys drafted in the last 2 years that could potentially be really good players. And you're going to bring both them off the bench in favor of Kyle Kuzma. And then this roster doesn't even show Saddiq Bey or Bub Carrington either. So this just does not make any sense to me as a roster right now. Maybe they are planning on making a ton of more moves here before the regular season starts. So the only team I've really heard that is interested in Kyle Kuzma is the Sacramento Kings. I think this deal gets it done here. Kevin Huerter, who just has 2 years left on his deal at $16 million for Kuzma, who has 3 years left. And then Devin Carter, the player that the Kings just took 13th overall. You could probably even get another first round pick from Sacramento, who's all in trying to make this a championship contender basically after getting DeRozan. If they also get Kuzma, that team's looking pretty good out in Sacramento. For Washington here, basically this is all about getting Devin Carter, who's a promising defensive guard, which they really need some defense out there, it seems like, who also doesn't expect to play probably until January, a guy that they can wait on as well. You get Kevin Huerter, who basically is just less money than Kuzma and only has 2 more years left on his deal. And then also you could probably get a first round pick from the Kings, who expect to be good and should expect to be picking like in the 20s. So I definitely like this move for Washington. Another deal here is Dallas, who has also been rumored to be interested in Kuzma. To get Kuzma, they would give up Kleber, Powell, and Exum, an expiring contract, plus a first round pick from Dallas coming out. You get two guys here that shouldn't be playing at all for you, but have just 2 years left on their deal, an expiring contract in Exum here, and you get a pick for Kuzma. So just a couple moves to get Kuzma off the roster and accelerate this rebuild. All right, so at the end of the day, I don't know Washington's plan here with some of these recent signings. The Beal trade looked pretty bad at first for what they got in return, but flipping Chris Paul for Poole and possibly another first-round pick, I think was a good move. They did well in the draft getting Sarr, Bub Carrington. The year before that, they got Koulibaly. So some good moves, just definitely some weird signings to try to be like a mediocre team this year instead of just absolutely tanking. So I'll be interested to see if they do make moves before the season starts. I really think Kuzma, they need to trade here at least, and they could get some pretty good value out of him because he is on a pretty good contract and should have some value to a contending team down the line. If you guys like NBA content like this, subscribe to my free NBA newsletter. I give kind of unhinged NBA opinions and talk about different topics similar to this. Give it a follow for free. It'll be the pinned comment. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel to see other videos like this.